In 2008, Spain built more homes than Germany, France, and the UK combined. Today, 3.8 million of those homes sit empty. That's one empty house for every 12 Spaniards. Meanwhile, 66% of young Spaniards can't afford to leave their parents' home. The country that nearly destroyed the Eurozone with its housing collapse hasn't learned a thing. Welcome to the Ghost Town Curse. And if you think this is just a Spanish problem, check what 94% of your paycheck going to rent feels like. Spanish housing prices just hit a new all-time high, 2,153 euros per square meter. That officially exceeds the 2008 peak, the same peak that triggered Europe's worst banking crisis. Young Spaniards now need 7.3 years of their entire salary to buy an average home. In Barcelona, rent consumes 94% of a young worker's paycheck. Let that sink in. 94%. This isn't just economics. Spain's fertility rate has crashed to 1.12 children per woman, second lowest in Europe. The average age to have a first child? 31.6 years. Demographers call it a baby strike. Young people who can't afford homes can't afford families. And Spain's not alone. Ireland, Portugal, Greece, they're all running the same playbook. In April 2025, hundreds of thousands marched across 40 cities under one slogan: "Let's end the housing business." The politicians who caused 2008? Mostly still in power. The investors who profited? Doubling down. And the trap that caught Spain once is closing again. To understand how Spain ended up here, we need to go back to when the country thought it had found the secret to endless prosperity. Spain's housing insanity began before the euro. Most people blame cheap European credit. They're wrong. On January 1st, 1986, Spain joined the European Community. Foreign investment flooded in, but the real foundation was laid a decade later. In May 1996, José María Aznar became prime minister. His government liberalized land laws, turning building land into a speculative commodity. Not housing, not homes, a commodity, like oil, like gold, except you could build apartment blocks on it. The euro wasn't the cause, it was the accelerant poured on an already burning fire. On January 1st, 1999, Spain joined the eurozone. Interest rates fell by 4 percentage points overnight, credit flooded in, and construction exploded. Between 2000 and 2009, Spain added 5 million new homes to an existing stock of 20 million. That's a 25% increase in a single decade. Do the math. For every new household formed, 1.6 homes were built. Not one home per family. 1.6. In 2006 alone, builders started nearly 800,000 homes, more than Germany, France, and the UK combined. Three of Europe's largest economies couldn't match one medium-sized country on a building spree. Land prices rose 500%, the largest increase of any OECD country. Real estate prices climbed 150% from 1998 to 2007. Construction investment rose from 6% of GDP to nearly 12%. The sector contributed 11% of total Spanish GDP. Now, who was writing the checks for all this construction? The Cajas, regional savings banks governed by boards stuffed with political appointees, local businessmen, and union representatives. Nobody had banking experience. Everyone had connections. At Caja Madrid, executives maintained secret corporate credit cards, the infamous Tarjetas Black. Between 2003 and 2012, 65 board members charged 12.5 million euros in personal expenses. One executive spent 3,500 euros on alcohol in a single spree. Another dropped nearly 1,000 euros on shoes in one day. The cards existed since 1988. Nobody checked. For 24 years. The monument to this madness is Sesena, 40 kilometers south of Madrid. Remember this name. It becomes important later. Developer Francisco Hernando, a former sewer cleaner nicknamed El Posero, planned 13,000 apartments for 40,000 people. He forgot to arrange water supply, schools, public transport. Minor details. By 2008, fewer than 3,000 of the 5,096 built units were occupied. Prices crashed from 250,000 euros to 50,000. El Posero moved his business to Equatorial Guinea. He died of COVID in April 2020, never facing criminal charges. Similar ghost towns sprouted across Spain. Ciudad Valdeluz, near Guadalajara, planned for 30,000 residents. Actual population? Fewer than 3,000. Marina on the Castellón coast, 12,000 apartments around abandoned fountains. The party was in full swing. The whole country was dancing on a volcano of cheap money and concrete. But every party ends, and the hangover that was coming would go down in history. But here's what most people miss about Spain's crash. It wasn't public debt. Spain had budget surpluses before 2008. The government was actually responsible. The real bomb was private debt. At 227% of GDP, households and corporations had borrowed themselves into oblivion. Unemployment hit 27%. Youth unemployment? 55.5%. More than half of young Spaniards couldn't find work. And here's what everyone forgets. The bailout didn't save Spanish homeowners. It saved German and French banks who'd bet on the Cajas. Spanish taxpayers paid for other countries' mistakes. The bailout created a monster that still haunts Spain today. In December 2010, 7 failing Cajas merged into Bankia, the largest bank merger in Spanish history. Leading it? Rodrigo Rato, former IMF managing director, former Spanish economy minister. If anyone understood banking risk, it was him. 7 months later, Bankia launched an IPO, raised 3.2 billion euros from 300,000 small investors. Minimum investment? 1,000 euros. The bank promised stability, growth, profits. Every supervisory body approved the prospectus. The Bank of Spain, the CNMV securities regulator, the FROB restructuring fund, the European Banking Authority. Everyone signed off. 1 year later, on May 7, 2012, Rato abruptly resigned. Days later, the bank revealed its true state. Not the 309 million euro profit it had claimed. A 3 billion euro loss. The 2012 loss would ultimately reach 19 billion euros, the largest corporate loss in Spanish history. On June 9, 2012, the Eurogroup agreed to provide Spain up to 100 billion euros to rescue its banking sector. Eventually, just over 41 billion was dispersed. Bankia alone received 22 to 24 billion. Spain created Sareb, the bad bank, to absorb toxic real estate from failing institutions. Think of it as a giant dumpster for bad loans. Initial portfolio? 50.78 billion euros in troubled assets acquired at a 53% discount. Sareb was supposed to wind down by November 2027. As of 2024, it still holds $19 billion in assets it can't sell. The estimated final cost to Spanish taxpayers? At end of 2015, Spain had a net debt of 46 billion euros derived from aid to the financial sector. That's assets minus liabilities. 46 billion. Gone.
Now, here's where it gets infuriating. Rodrigo Rato was eventually convicted, but not for collapsing Bankia. He served 4.5 years for the Black Cards embezzlement scheme, the corporate credit card scandal. Miguel Blesa, Caja Madrid's president, received 6 years. He committed suicide shortly after. The 2020 trial for the Bankia IPO fraud? All 34 defendants acquitted. The court ruled that since every supervisory body approved the prospectus, no individual could be held responsible. The system failed. Nobody was guilty. Let that sink in. 300,000 small investors who lost their savings received partial compensation. 1.5 to 2 billion euros repaid. The rest? Gone. As Spanish banks collapsed, international investors saw opportunity. Not opportunity to help, opportunity to profit. Blackstone entered Spain in 2013. They acquired 1,860 public housing units from Madrid City Hall for 128.5 million euros, about 70,000 euros per unit on average. A court-ordered audit found the deals were well below market value. Blackstone hiked rents by 49%. Blackstone's Spanish empire now exceeds 20 billion euros, 100,000 real estate assets, including 10,000 rental apartments through vehicles with names like Fidere Patrimonio and Albirana Properties. This makes Blackstone the second largest landlord in Spain, with some 19,600 rented properties. Bookmark this section. You'll want to reference these numbers next time someone says foreign investment is good for housing. Lone Star created Nanor Homes, purchasing CaixaBank's real estate arm for 935 million euros and IPOing at 1.3 billion. Cerberus, Goldman Sachs, Varde Partners. Every major distressed debt fund established Spanish operations. Meanwhile, Spain passed legislation making it easier for investors to avoid taxes. The 2012 SOCIMI law, Spain's version of REITs, allows property investment companies to pay 0% corporate tax if they distribute 80% of profits as dividends. 0%, while Spanish workers pay up to 47% income tax. Today, 70% of SOCIMI capital is held by international investors. Housing prices bottomed in 2014 and have risen ever since. By September 2025, they reached 21.53 euros per square meter, surpassing the 2008 peak in nominal terms. But unlike 2008, this isn't a construction boom. Spain completed about 90,000 homes per year between 2021 and 2023, with roughly 110,000 new construction permits annually. The country now has a housing deficit of 700,000 homes, according to the Bank of Spain's November 2025 estimate. New households form at 246,000 per year. Builders complete barely 100,000 homes. The result? Prices are rising not because of speculation, but because of genuine scarcity. Or so the optimists say. But here's what nobody wants to admit. Spain's 3.8 million empty homes can't solve this crisis because they're in the wrong places.
45% of Spain's empty homes are in municipalities with fewer than 50,000 people, dying villages where no one wants to live. In Madrid, the true vacancy rate is 5.6%. In Barcelona, it's barely higher. The ghost towns didn't stay empty because of greed. Many filled up. Remember Sesena, the symbol of 2008 excess? Now has 100% occupancy and a waiting list. The curse isn't too many homes, it's building them where people don't want to live. If you've made it this far, you already understand more about Spain's housing crisis than 99% of people commenting on it. But here's where it gets really interesting. Spain's population is growing by 500,000 people annually, almost entirely from immigration. Native fertility has collapsed to 1.12 children per woman. The population is simultaneously aging and expanding through migration. This creates two housing crises running in parallel. Elderly Spaniards own homes they're too frail to maintain, while young immigrants and natives compete for a rental stock that barely exists. 57% of foreign households rent, versus just 14.7% of native Spanish households. The pressure falls entirely on the rental market. Hey, quick question for the comments. If you were a young Spaniard right now, would you wait it out and hope for reform, or would you emigrate? Let me know below. Tourism accounts for 12 to 15% of Spanish GDP, up to 249 billion euros in 2024. It employs 3 million workers. Spain welcomed 94 million international tourists last year, a record for the 8th consecutive year. But tourism doesn't just bring visitors. It brings 171 million guest nights in Airbnb-style accommodations, second in Europe only to France. In Barcelona, 11,300 tourist apartments operate legally. Mayor Colboni announced in June 2024 that all 10,000 licenses will expire by November 2028. No renewals. The tourist apartment economy has driven Barcelona rents up 62 to 68% over the past decade. In December 2025, Spain fined Airbnb 65 million euros. The charge? Over 65,000 illegal listings nationwide. In May 2025, those listings were removed. Protesters marched under signs reading, "Your holidays, my misery." But here's the trap. Ban tourist apartments, and Spain loses billions in revenue and jobs. Allow them, and locals can't afford to live in their own cities. It's a lose-lose. After 2008, construction companies went bankrupt. Workers emigrated. The survivors became extremely cautious. Today, converting agricultural land to residential development takes 10 to 20 years. Planning permissions are split between 17 autonomous communities with different rules. Developers face legal uncertainty, bureaucratic delays, and political opposition. The result? Spain needs 200,000 new homes annually, but builds barely half that. Official housing deficit? 700,000 homes. Between 2022 and 2024, Spain accumulated a deficit of more than 400,000 homes, with another 100,000 expected in 2025 alone. Half of this shortfall is concentrated in 5 cities: Madrid, Barcelona, Valencia, Alicante, and Malaga. But wait, there's a fix for all this, right? Rent control? Spain tried that. Here's what happened. Spain passed its landmark housing law in May 2023. It capped rent increases at 2% for 2023, then 3% for 2024, with a new index limiting increases from 2025. It allowed municipalities to declare stressed areas with stricter controls. One problem: only Catalonia has implemented stressed area designations. Conservative regional governments in Madrid, Andalusia, and elsewhere refused to apply the law, and landlords found a loophole: seasonal rental contracts, not covered by the legislation. According to Brian Rosa at the Autonomous University of Barcelona, landlords found a way around the law. They converted long-term units to seasonal lets. 9 out of 10 tenants in Barcelona now have temporary contracts. 3/4 of rental ads? Rooms via seasonal lets. Despite rent caps, market rents rose 11.5% in 2024. In December 2025, Catalonia passed Spain's first law banning the temporary rental trick, closing the loophole. But the damage was done. Spain spends 0.23% of GDP on housing, versus France's 1.6% or Austria's 1.4%. Social housing represents just 2 to 3% of total stock, one of the lowest in the OECD. According to the OECD, only 2% of Spanish rental homes are public housing, compared to 14% in France and 34% in the Netherlands. To reach the EU average, Spain would need to build 1.5 million social rental units. There's no budget, no political will, no construction capacity. And it gets worse. In 2013, the conservative People's Party government of Madrid sold 5,000 units of public housing to Blackstone and Goldman Sachs at below-market prices. Remember them? A court-ordered audit confirmed the deals were below market value. Then Mayor Ana Botella and others were ordered to pay 26 million euros in penalties, later overturned. Those properties have been permanently removed from social housing stock. The final trap is intergenerational, and it's the cruelest one. Young Spaniards face impossible math. A young person would need 93.9% of their salary to rent alone. Only 27% of under 30s own their homes. For the first time, more than half of Spaniards under 30 are renters. The average age to leave home? 30.3 years. EU average, 26.2. Youth unemployment? 25%. Still highest in the developed world. The only escape? Family wealth. Parents funding deposits has become the primary route to home ownership. Those without wealthy parents? They wait. They protest. They emigrate. Between 2012 and 2016, an estimated 1.6 million Spaniards under 34 left the country. Over 53.8% had university studies. Spain spent decades educating them. Other countries got the benefit. So who actually benefits from keeping Spain trapped? The winners of Spain's housing crisis are easy to identify. They're just rarely named. The SOCIMIs, Spain's real estate investment trusts, own billions in rental properties while paying 0% corporate tax. Merlin Properties alone controls 12 billion euros, including 7% of Madrid's office stock. 70% of SOCIMI capital is held by international investors. Blackstone transformed from vulture investor to Spain's second-largest private landlord. Their €128.5 million bet on Madrid public housing has appreciated massively, funded partly by guarantees from the Spanish state. In September 2025, Blackstone announced it might sell its €1.2 billion Spanish rental portfolio, citing regulatory pressures. Translation: rent controls might finally affect profits. Across the country, approximately 185,000 rental properties are owned by large corporations, half owned by U.S.-based firms. The banks cleaned their balance sheets by selling toxic assets to foreign funds at discounts, then earned management fees on the transactions. Caja Bank, which absorbed Bankia, is now Spain's largest domestic bank, with 624 billion euros in assets. CEO José Ignacio Goytigolzari was brought in to rescue Bankia. He now runs the combined giant. The construction lobby has awakened. New fund-backed developers like Nanor Homes and ADAS Homes are land banking across Spain, waiting for regulations to loosen. Industry forecasts predict 825,000 transactions in 2025. Now, the contrarian argument, advanced by economist Gonzalo Bernados and others, says this isn't a bubble at all. Prices are rising because supply is genuinely constrained. Household debt is half of 2008 levels, 44% of GDP versus 64%. Bank lending remains conservative. Construction is too slow, not too fast. Maybe they're right. Spain in 2025 has few of the preconditions that caused 2008. No credit binge, no speculative building, no over-leveraged households. But Spain also has something 2008 didn't: a generation locked out of home ownership, a ruling class that faced no accountability, and investors who learned they can privatize gains while socializing losses. So what happens to Spain and the 700,000 families who need homes that don't exist? 3 scenarios, none of them good.
Scenario 1. The slow burn. Prices continue rising 4 to 8% annually. Construction gradually increases but never catches demand. Young Spaniards increasingly rely on inheritance to buy homes. Spain becomes a two-tier society: those born to home-owning parents and permanent renters. Birth rates decline further. The economy remains stable but stratified. Scenario 2. The policy shock. A political realignment, perhaps after the mass protests, produces aggressive intervention: empty property taxes, mandatory affordable housing quotas, SOCIMI taxation, tourist apartment bans spread nationwide. Some investors exit. Prices stabilize or fall modestly. Construction accelerates with public investment. Spain slowly builds the social housing stock it's lacked for decades. This requires sustained political will. Spain has rarely demonstrated. Pedro Sanchez has announced 12 reforms. Barcelona's 2028 tourist rental ban could be a model. New January 2026 regulations target abusive temporary contracts. Catalonia's December 2025 law banning seasonal rental tricks shows progress is possible. But BBVA research still predicts continued price increases. Scenario 3. The external shock. A European recession, ECB policy error, or geopolitical crisis triggers capital flight. Spain's property market, now 14 to 18% dependent on foreign buyers, experiences sudden price correction. Unlike 2008, household balance sheets are healthier and banks are better capitalized. But SAREB's 19 billion euros in unsold assets suddenly becomes 25 billion in losses. The bad bank requires another bailout. History rhymes. Spain isn't alone in this trap. Ireland, prices up nearly 92% since 2015. Portugal, prices up 141% since 2010, more than doubled. Greece, up 9.5% in the first half of 2024 alone. Spain, up 72% since 2015, against an EU average of 58%. The playbook is the same everywhere: cheap credit, speculation, crash, austerity, foreign investors buying the wreckage, locals locked out. Spain will not build its way out of this crisis quickly. The construction capacity doesn't exist. Political consensus doesn't exist.
The 700,000 home deficit will take decades to close. What Spain could do: tax empty homes, build social housing, regulate tourist apartments, hold executives accountable. It has repeatedly chosen not to do. The same parties that oversaw 2008 still govern most regions. The same banks that collapsed now dominate the market. The same investors who bought distressed assets are selling at peak prices. The ghost towns filled up. The ghost economy never left. Before you go, 5 takeaways. 1. Beware the real estate always goes up myth. Spain proves it doesn't. 2. Watch private debt, not just public debt. The real danger is often hidden. 3. Political connections to banking equals red flag. The Caja model was a disaster waiting to happen. 4. Geographic diversification matters. Don't bet everything on one market. 5. Question solutions that benefit investors over residents. Next time someone tells you real estate always goes up, show them Spain. The curse of the ghost towns isn't that Spain built too much. It's that they built in the wrong places, for the wrong people, with the wrong money. And they're doing it all over again. And if you haven't seen our deep dive into Germany's energy crisis, check it out. Links on screen. Another country betting its future on policies that can't work. Now I want to hear from you. Drop your prediction in the comments. Will Spain stabilize with slow reform, or are we watching a 2008 sequel in slow motion?